Well, it only took 18 years. It's actually crazy how long it's been since Metroid Prime 3 came out. I was 12 years old when it came out, a mere fetus by comparison to the great lumbering mass I am today. In fact, fetuses became full-grown adults in the time between Primes 3 and 4. In all fairness, Prime 4 was announced to be in development in 2017, which was only a full decade after its predecessor came out, but issues arose with original developer Bandai Namco Studios, so a couple years later, good old Retro Studios was called in to take the reins and start from scratch and sniff. Complications arose, ensued, were overcome, and half a decade later, out pops Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Seriously though, Metroid Prime 4's elongated development had become such a running gag that by the time Nintendo finally dropped a nice juicy gameplay trailer in June 2024, it was almost as surprising as it was relieving. Now that the game is out though, the fanbase has been satisfied and satiated like a baby Metroid on Mammy Sammy, right?
Okay, I got it! Oh, no.
Well, not quite. Turns out Prime 4 is actually a pretty divisive title. The general consensus is that it looks and sounds phenomenal and does a good job recreating and expanding upon the base Prime gameplay model. But there are too many talky NPCs, level design is too guided and linear, the desert area is largely empty and overlarge, and arguably plays things a little too safe, possessing too few true substantial changes to justify such an extended period of development. Like a gourmet pizza that takes an hour to cook, but comes out tasting like Little Caesars. There's a startling amount of grifters out here making a living off of bashing the game, to the point that you'd think this might be the most disappointing game of the millennium. Now, perhaps it's just my contrarian nature speaking, but I came into the experience hoping that these complaints would largely be overblown, and that Beyond would actually go beyond all my expectations. Regardless, I came into it with an open mind and open eyeballs, determined to judge for myself whether these things were true, and more importantly, to enjoy the experience for what it is, regardless of its imperfections. So without further ado, let's high jump in. We're immediately thrown into the action with an intense and awesomely cinematic sequence fighting off the wicked space pirates and defending Galactic Federation Koopa Troopas, where we get reintroduced to the overall gameplay and controls that Prime Series veterans should be very familiar with. I did have to make some adjustments to make things more comfortable, but there's an admirable level of customization here, including options for motion controls and, of course, even mouse controls. Cheese not included for the mice, though. The gunplay is tight and responsive as ever, and the whole sequence has such a cool cinematic flair, like playing through a top-notch war game. It really nails the AAA vibe, and makes me confident I won't need a battery refill anytime soon. Still, the Federation needs to get its act together. I mean, just look at these bums taking naps in the middle of an invasion. Not cool. Give them a little blast for discipline. Of course, you can still scan things to understand every last paramecium of mechanical or lore detail, if you enjoy boring stuff like that. Eventually, we come across this giant creature and, what the? Whoa, the Metroid just kind of sloops into him. Or her. Not gonna lie, I just think that looks a little too goofy for its own good. But regardless, we gotta take this big nasty boy or girl out. Afterwards, the mysterious and elusive Silex crashes the party, having had his last substantial appearance all the way back in Metroid Prime Hunters. Being the original screw the police gangsta he is, he's got a bit of a grudge against Samus and the feds, but his careless saltiness ends up triggering a strange alien artifact that slurps everybody in the surrounding area before spitting him out on the alien planet, Vuros. We wake up on the Grand Chrono Trigger, tower, before taking a trip on some shrooms and talking to the lovely Lamourning, who of course need some kind of saving. Business as usual. We then gain some nifty new psychic powers, which cleverly expand on the scan visor. Then we enter the fantastical forest of Fury Green. It was here that I was struck by a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. An overpowering, almost religious sense of grandeur and majesty, as though God himself were taking you on a walk through Eden. It's something the Prime games have long excelled at, and very few games have truly captured. But here it is, doing it once again. If I hadn't mentioned it yet, this game is stunningly gorgeous, and alongside the beautiful, soulful music accompanying it, I was completely transported into its world. I'm not even sure there's anything that could take me out of this moment. It's just too...
Hey! Hey, Samus Aran! I'm stuck! Help me out! Oh. Please get me down.
Oh. Talking NPCs.
Okay, that did not sound friendly.
Annoying ones, too. Well, that's great.
Hang on.
Maybe I'll just,
If you really wanna
nope.
shoot something,
Shooting doesn't
you
work.
could try that piston.
Shame. Well, in spite of this McKinsey guy being kind of intentionally aggravating, he actually didn't bother me too much personally.
Please stop.
I don't know, I just felt like this nerdy archetype was played well enough, and with enough humorous self-awareness that it didn't rail on me the way I thought it might. I definitely wouldn't want him covering me in a firefight, but that's not even a concern because this dude doesn't even try.
I'm just gonna stay out of your way.
Good to know your strengths, I guess. We nabbed the nifty new psychic charge beam, allowing us to directly guide the beam blast around tight corners, which would be nifty if you needed to knock somebody out for taking too much time in a bathroom stall. And it gets put to the test immediately against the ferocious, flowery Carvex. It's a little PO'd because it hasn't been watered in a couple of decades and understandably wants to snack on you, but the fight itself is a lot of fun and grants us the nifty psychic bomb. We snatch ourselves the first of 5 MacGuffins, plot devices, teleporter keys, as Mr. Lamourning requests we pick up some green energy so he can grow some tasty memory fruit. Haha, green energy. That's original. Really though, this guy is just hungry, so he's basically sending us grocery shopping. After taking a small break to spank McKinsey for just being himself,
You are sneaky quiet, you know that?
we yeet our way out of there, receive a message from the Lamourning about their history and using the planet's resources for technology, and make our way to the lovely towers of Volt Forge, where said technology was manufactured. If Fury Green was defined by its naturalistic beauty, Volt Forge is pretty much the complete opposite, but that's actually a great thing in this case, because this place is totally metal. Literally. 3 gigantic, wicked-looking towers connected by a single path and set in the middle of a gigantic thunderstorm while an electric guitar blares in the background? It would be hard to be any more metal than that. I wouldn't be surprised to see Captain Falcon racing around these corners. Speaking of which, our goal here is to find a way to fit into this fancy motorcycle, because Queen Samus's big hips ain't fitting so great in it right now, and she needs a worthy vessel to bump these rockin' tunes in. We engage in some classic industrial problem solving to get this place up and running again, then make our way back up to try out the new whip named Viola. Unfortunately, we don't get to try her out for too long right now, but we'll get back to our darling cycle soon enough. We bash our way through some bad bots before being confronted by a robot impersonating Silex, and again, the combat here is really fun, and it's an enjoyable fight. That being said, it was around this time that I did notice the level design within each individual biome seems to be more linear than in previous entries. As in, you might as well call the 3 towers here Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3, because that's what they are. It's not inherently a bad design choice, but it arguably takes away from some of the thrill of exploration when you clearly know where to go most of the time. But then we finally get to spend some time in training with our sweet girl Viola, and I'm not sure there's ever been a more unabashedly cool portrayal of Samus than seeing her pop wheelies and pull off Akira slides in a motorcycle. If Fury Green reminded me of how majestic the series can be, Volt Forge reminded me to embrace how wicked cool Samus Aran is. Plus, the sense of linearity in this area's level design was largely offset by the variety of tasks being done, be it platforming and puzzle solving, bot bashing, or vrooming with Viola. After whipping the organic, polygonal, supercomputer Zelios's hardware hiney and picking up Teleporter Key 2 alongside the Psychic Jump, we boost our way out of there. Because we now have our lovely Viola with us, we can speedily traverse the desolate, barren Swole Valley, boosting, shooting bots, smashing Walter White's meth, although Hank would probably call them minerals, and exploring various large pieces of downed Federation debris and small Zelda-like puzzle shrines for upgrades. Some might argue that this area is too large and empty, but I swear these people haven't touched Breath of the Wild or any other recent open-world game, because it's not a fraction of the size of those worlds, so reaching your destination is pretty quick work, and I can't see traversal here as being more than a small aggravation at worst. I was all excited to vroom my way through Lava Land, or Flare Pool, but this jerk decided to lift the drawbridge, leaving me unable to cross the lava moat into his volcanic castle, or factory. So instead, I just picked up a fire chip, which, contrary to intuition, is not an edible snack, before Mackenzie reminded me he needed a good beating, so I vroomed back to Fury Green so he could give me the fire beam upgrade.
Ow, that burns!
And unfortunately, that can't off him either, but we'll keep on trying. I'll admit, it's slightly aggravating that you can't just directly install the fire beam upgrade like you would in previous games, as if Samus forgot to take a refresher course in arm cannon upgrades during the 18-year hiatus. The only real reason to backtrack to the forest is that the game wants us to build a sense of camaraderie with the feds, but it's a short trip, so it ultimately didn't really bother me. Not that I needed it, but Mackenzie also radioed to remind me that fire melts ice, so into the frosty ice belt we go. Unfortunately, Santa's not here to grace me with gifts from his massive magical sack. Instead, these wolves are hoping to get a piece of me. I got torn to shreds of pulled pork the first time I faced these ferocious buggers, but eventually got through with the help of my friendly neighborhood sniper man, Hibachi, or Takabi.
I never thought I'd meet the legendary bounty hunter, Samus.
In a place like this.
He's certainly a more understated and realistic feeling character than old Mashable Mackenzie, and he leaves you alone for the most part. His shut-uppness is certainly a nice change of pace. In a lot of ways, this area feels the most like a traditional Metroid world. You explore this eerily quiet station with very few living organisms around, scanning objects and finding these psychic telekinesis keys to open up new sections as you make your way deeper into the underbelly of this facility. Picking up the cool psychic lasso to do our best Simon Belmont impression and rip and tear stuff for real. But when we find the generator and get the power back on, everything else here comes alive too, like in the wrecked ship of Super Metroid. This includes the poor Grievers, who are uncontrollably violent Lamourn that snorted too many green bath salts. It's actually sad because this facility was designed to safely store them as they ran experiments in an ultimately futile attempt to find a cure for the green crystal meth crazies. And they say green energy is safe. Well, unfortunately, I gotta blast these poor rabbit souls to defend both myself and my new pal Takabi. Afterwards, I went down into the hidden depths of the facility to engage in a discussion with the grumpily tenacious Keratos over the custody of the third teleporter key. Come to think of it, Keratos sounds like Kratos, the god of war. Kinda cheeky, but the name makes sense. Before leaving, Takabi shows us his lucky charms. For some reason. We then take the tasty sounding ice chip we found back to Mackenzie.
Oh, that's freezing!
But you can't freeze him either. Dang, this engineer's built like a tank. Who'd have thought? Thank you, Mackenzie, for telling me to go back to Volt Forge instead of letting me explore and find out for myself. Though I guess it's okay for players who don't feel like wandering around for hours, like a husband forced to shop for clothes at a mall. Back in Lightningville, we pick up the Icky suit, so named because the motorcycle turns into a hovercraft to prevent you becoming icky from the lava. Maybe we can run over Mackenzie with this. Next, I made my way to the flare pool, froze the magma that was blocking our path, and returned to the place where we were rudely refused entrance to the Grand Volcano Castle. Lock me out, will ya? Well, too bad. I'm taking the back door now, baby. It doesn't take too long for us to get involved with another Fed trooper, though, as we meet up with Mr. Chad, aka Ezra Duke. He's a fun guy, but without all the poisonous spores, and he seems to have an obsession with tasty foods.
Is that boiler is putting off enough heat to turn me into casserole?
Funny guy, but not too silly either. The next section of gameplay is very much guided, as you have to make your way down the facility with Duke, fighting alongside him and even healing him as needed, which adds an extra onion layer to combat encounters. Turns out this volcano busts out green energy every once in a while, which was done intentionally by the Lamourning to accelerate the growth of life on the planet and presumably replenish the resources necessary for their industrial needs as well. But of course, this is what ultimately caused a bunch of the creatures, Lamourning included, to mutate. I love how this connects multiple plot threads and locations here. Swole Valley represents much of the planet how they initially found it, explaining why the Lamourning wanted to encourage growth on the planet. The flare pool provided the green energy to cause and accelerate this growth, so they built a facility there to widely distribute it. Fury Green represents the planet in a place of abundant growth and life that resulted from this distribution, while the Ice Belt quietly displays the tragic, unintended consequences that came about from meddling too carelessly with the planet's resources. I just think that they did a great job uniting the various biomes from a storytelling perspective, making it feel like a complete world rather than just multiple disparate parts slapped together. Back to our current situation though, we meet up with Miss Armstrong, who, despite wearing a space uniform, is not Neil Armstrong's wife. And this chatty Samus Aran groupie wastes no time in fangirling over us.
I don't even know what to say. Is this a new suit? It's amazing. I love it. I love it so
Private.
much. Yes, sir. Right. Sorry.
She's just below Mackenzie on the annoying chatterbox scale. She then follows alongside us as we make our way back to the facility's entrance. But unfortunately, the place starts falling apart, and we have to abandon our friends for now so that we can search for our important magic key. Oh dear, all alone in a Metroid game. How terrible. Funny thing is, even though I understand why people don't care for the more linear, action-driven, character-filled direction this game takes, most of the segments characterized by this are pretty short-lived. Maybe it kills the vibe for some people, like you're relaxing on the toilet and then a Jehovah's Witness knocks on your door. But I was able to enjoy the moments for what they were, even if I generally preferred my moments alone. It's time to use our icky Viola to glide through the newly opened gate near the facility's entrance, where we face against the lava dragon Finneros in our lava hover bike. That's just too cool, man. After hitting enough of his sensitive lumps, he gets ticked and freaking swallows Viola. Well, we gotta finish the fight on land, or magma, I guess, which isn't too crazy difficult. But I didn't know you were supposed to use a charged psychic beam to kill him while he was stunned at first, and I almost bought the dust because of it. Beating this dude grants us our fourth key and the wicked cool psychic grapple, before putting us on the spot and forcing us to get good, lest we perish in an awesome fiery volcanic explosion. I don't know who always triggers these things, or why they give us a visible countdown timer beforehand, but it's definitely becoming a bit of a habit. On our way out, we say goodbye to Big Duke and Little Armstrong, who decide that taking an escape shuttle is faster and safer than swimming through lava. Our fangirl clearly doesn't understand that Samus is immune to self-destruct sequences. The only thing I wish they added to this fun segment is having a Viola section to race through before time runs out. It would have been neat to actually do it ourselves, you know? After ensuring we have magnetic balls, we get the band back together for a vacation to the family-friendly Great Mines so we can nab the final teleporter key. Right off the bat, Tanuki and the Iron Giant stay behind to defend against a swarm of angry grievers, while Samus, Armstrong, and Duke the Cuke plunge the depths of the mine. There's mining equipment, raw ore, and giant...
What's this huge thing?
drilling apparatuses. But as the grievers start attacking, good old Duke hops aboard the self-sacrifice train and stays behind to block more of the General Grievers from coming. This area is legitimately intense, as the environment is icky and organic, and it's uncomfortably claustrophobic. Plus, making loud noises, particularly with missiles, inadvertently summons a horde of grievers to your location, so you have to be careful how you fight your enemies. Just remember, barbecues are okay, explosions during barbecues aren't. Doesn't take too long for Armstrong to catch the Christmas spirit, so she stays behind to plug some holes too. I swear, there's so much clogging here, my toilet would be embarrassed. After a brief stint of loneliness, though, Mr. Robot comes in clutch to save the day for a bit, help you nab a super missile, and promptly sacrifice himself so that Samus can get away, of course. It was admittedly eerie to be left alone at this point, especially since that meant facing the demonic-looking Omega Griever by myself. Great fight, but I definitely would have appreciated the help here rather than earlier. Sacrifice yourself later next time, would ya? This guy tried to pull a fast one on me just like the Fire Dragon, but eventually Samus wins the day and obtains the last remaining teleporter key before hightailing it out of there. Fortunately, it turns out that all our buddies survived. Somehow. Wait, how did they survive? Whatever. Maybe they dug away like moles. Even though we have all our MacGuffins, or keys, we need to find some MacGuffins, or mech parts to reassemble the giant robot in Fury Green and assist in our getaway. Plus, it doesn't hurt to fill up on green energy, which is easier than ever now that we have the psychic power bomb to blow these giant rocks to smithereens. I found Tabaki smoking a joint over here. Can't blame him given the week he's had. After singing Kumbaya around the campfire, he pulls a teleporter chip out of his weed stash and gives it to us, which allows us to actually transport the massive Yo Mama, or mech parts, back to Crumblebot. Grabbing these is straightforward enough, though I can't say I cared for the fight against the giant desert whale that swallowed one of them. Samus needs to read her Bible more, as it is not advisable to voluntarily enter the belly of a whale. I did enjoy the fight against Lava Mr. Krabs, who somebody clearly poured spicy tartar sauce on, because this flaming pirate ain't happy. But after returning all the mech pieces and gathering enough clean, or green energy, I deposited said energy so I can finally pluck the legendary memory fruit. I also got a fancy new Caucasian suit to go along with it. And with that, we're ready to activate the Chrono Trigger, or break into Chrono Tower. Unfortunately, our newly assembled mech lasts all of 1 minute before imploding due to the sheer force of its biting blast, because we just can't have a weapon that OP for the final battle. Speaking of which, the whole squad joins in for one last confrontation with Silux atop the tower, and we're all clearly having a great time because we're even skipping rope together. Turns out the reason Salty Silux is so PO'd is that Samus was involved in an incident that caused his whole crew to be wiped out, back when he was a Federation Koopa Troopa himself. So he turned his back on the feds and swore his revenge on Samus. In a desperate measure, he sucks you into the beyond with him for a final one-on-one confrontation, which is great fun, especially since we're pretty OP at this point, and after beating his booty, we return back to the tower. While the teleporter is being activated, old Salty returns to screw you one last time. But this time, your buddies all give Buffalo Fluffalo a group hug to buy you just enough time to make your way out of there before the teleporter blows, sacrificing themselves for your sake. And my man Silux finally figured out how to down Mackenzie, which is all I ever really needed in this life. Sucks that everybody else had to go down with him, but Mackenzie is gone now, so...
Win?
Houdini, or Tabaki, passes us his lucky charm before we leave too. And with that, we've made it safely back to... wherever we initially came from, I guess. In a somber closing scene, Samus plants the memory fruit and gives it a jumpstart by feeding it her tasty psychic crystal. Just imagine if she had eaten it instead after all that time. I'm just saying, it's been a long journey. People get hungry, you know? But in a lovely final touch, Samus hangs the lucky charm on the newly growing tree, signifying that the memory of the soldier's sacrifice will be remembered alongside the history of the Lamourning. At first, I wasn't quite sure how to feel about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. It's kind of funny though, because after playing through it fully twice, I can understand most of the issues that people have with the game, and even agree that some of them are problems. But the difference is, I don't find that these issues are substantial enough to make the overall gaming experience less enjoyable for me personally. But I feel like it's worth addressing these issues in depth to really convey why I feel this way. As I mentioned earlier, Swole Valley is often considered an unnecessarily large and empty world that really only serves to connect all the main biomes, and maybe provide a few extra challenges outside of that. While I do think that they could have done more with it, it's a comparatively small part of the overall experience, and it really is inoffensive at worst, especially if you know where you're going. Not to mention, it does legitimately feel good driving Viola around, and there's a few neat challenges to beat with her, like running over Mackenzie.
Ow, that burns!
Wait, no, that's not in the game. Dang. Regardless, I still had fun with it. In terms of the game's overall linearity, I was admittedly a little disappointed at first that I wasn't hopping frequently from one world to the next, searching for clues to the next destination, and that the worlds themselves were more self-contained and level-like in structure. But this feeling largely subsided over time as the inherent quality of the worlds and their stories consistently shined through. And that arguably matters more than world structure itself. People don't usually approach Metroid games as they would a roller coaster, but it really has the same appeal. It's a thrilling experience even if you know where you're going. If you can't get past that, I understand. But I think it's worth trying to embrace what it offers here because what it offers is great. It's Metroid Prime! The moment-to-moment gameplay not only replicates what came before, but also expands meaningfully on it. So losing out on that experience seems like a real shame to me. Like throwing out ice cream because you didn't like the cone. Ironically, the largest concern that nagged at me for a while was that Prime 4 doesn't substantially change the gameplay formula of the series. The controls, gunplay, and platforming are all high-quality vintage Prime, but it's largely familiar, feeling more like an extension of the formula rather than a reinvention. It's more the equivalent of putting chocolate dip and sprinkles over your cone in that sense. Its delectability is increased, no doubt, but it's not that different. Put very simply, this is not Metroid's Breath of the Wild. But the more I thought about it, the more I actually felt kinda glad about that. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see the Prime series have a substantial gameplay makeover. Personally, I would love to see the already great action get infused with whatever steroids Metroid Dread took that made it such a Tasmanian devil of seamless gameplay and combat. I would love to see the Prime series' sense of environmental majesty married with the horror, gore, and existential dread present in many of the 2D entries. I'd certainly be interested in an open-world Metroid game, so long as they maintain the strong sense of meaningful exploration and growth that the series routinely imbues to us players so masterfully. But if they can't find a way to give us an open world that works, then I would rather have something that does work, no matter how familiar it is. I agree entirely that it's important for any series to expand, grow, and improve over time, but that doesn't inherently mean that the fundamentals have to change, or that games with similar structures or gameplay don't offer unique and compelling experiences in and of themselves. I've eaten countless brands of pizza at this point in my gluttonous Italian life, and I can firmly say that nearly every one has something special that makes it enjoyable in its own way. As for the presence of the rather talky NPCs, it's worth noting that the majority of the time you will find yourself alone, so Samus can still do her space emo thing in peace for the most part. I completely understand the view that a proper sense of isolation provides the tone and atmosphere necessary for the Metroid series to thrive, and I do think that if the series loses too much of that, then it in turn loses something vital to its identity. Even so, I think it's worth having some level of flexibility over how much interaction is too much. Having Samus interact repeatedly with the Space Popo without actually interacting with them is unrealistic from a storytelling perspective, not to mention repetitive as well. Match time with COVID is over, and Samus can't be doing Zoom calls and social distancing anymore, though getting her mask off willingly might just be a lost cause. I get it, I really do. We all like Samus when she's on her lonesome, but I'm at least open to enjoying and judging the experience and unique atmosphere that each Metroid game brings on its own merit. I actually love Metroid Fusion in spite of its linearity and occasional loquaciousness, because I think it takes advantage of these things to provide a grippingly tense plot alongside wonderful gameplay. While most of these characters aren't super compelling, even the more talky ones aren't that aggravating to me personally, and their time in the spotlight is pretty brief. But more importantly, the narrative simply wouldn't work the same without them. The story of Beyond is ultimately about leaving a legacy. The mission of the game is about passing the knowledge, wisdom, warnings, and stories of the Lamourn on, even after they themselves have passed away as a people. The Lamourn were looking beyond themselves, seeking to help others with their remaining time, rather than just lament that their days were cut short. By the end of the game, the Federation troopers, goofy as they may be, sacrificed themselves so that they could pass on the legacy and stories of those who had already passed away themselves. Their legacy is now the Lamourn legacy. It's a beautiful and thematically rich story, and it simply wouldn't hit the way it does without them. Ironically, their sacrifice is tied in with Silex's bitterness over his deceased Federation comrades and hatred for Samus, which ties everything together nicely. We can argue about the quality of the characters and writing, and the frequency of NPC interactions, but it ultimately serves to produce a stronger narrative. So for my part, I'm willing to embrace the NPCs as part of this experience. Beyond everything else, Metroid Prime 4 is defined by this idea of legacy, from its story all the way down to its gameplay. I understand that not everybody is going to like the characters or enjoy the story the way I have, and that's okay. Not everybody is going to appreciate the game's relative linearity or Swole Valley's open-esque world, and I know that many are disappointed with the lack of substantial changes in the gameplay department. Ironically, I think people would have preferred to see the gameplay updated more, while retaining the atmospheric isolation and storytelling of the older games. But as I played through Beyond and took it for what it is rather than for what I wanted it to be, I found a gorgeous game with fantastic music, a thematically rich and powerful story, beautiful and diverse worlds, and great gameplay that refines and expands on the existing series template. We can argue about whether or not it should have done more and how we should look beyond to see where the series should go from here. But as a sequel, Metroid Prime 4 does its predecessors proud and stands shoulder to shoulder with them. And as a game in and of itself, it's a wonderful and memorable experience. And that's a legacy to be proud of, regardless of what the future holds. I understand the issues that people have with Prime 4, I really do. And if you don't enjoy it, that's okay. But I enjoyed the experience very greatly, and I wanted to provide a positive view of the game in the midst of what I perceive to be a sea of mixed feelings and disappointment, so that if anybody else out there enjoys it like I did, they know that they're not alone in feeling the greatness within this game. Whew! This video was a monster to make, but I'm really happy with it. I'll be taking a well-earned break from the Metroid games for a bit to focus on some other game series in the upcoming months, but I expect I'll get back to the series before summer rolls around. I hope you're looking forward to my new videos. Alright, well, without further ado, I'll see you on the next one.